Welcome to the Divine Lifestyles Podcast. I'm your host, Tara Magalski. Together with my guest experts, I cover topics ranging from cutting-edge healing modalities to hormonal harmony, to nutrition and plant medicine, to mindfulness and spirituality. My goal is to educate and inspire so you can create your own divine lifestyle. It's time to dive inward, rewire your brain, and heal from the inside out. Hey, beautiful soul fam. Please join Divine Lifestyles for a transformative and empowering women's healing retreat, October 16th through 22nd in Mexico. It's going to be a 6-night, 7-day experience that is designed to uplift your spirit, help you transcend trauma, and lead you towards a life of a renewed freedom and empowerment. Nestled in a serene and tranquil oasis, this amazing property in Cien Can provides the perfect sanctuary for you to nurture your body and embark on a journey of self-discovery, renewal, and of course, rejuvenation. Learn more at divinelifestyles.com/transcendence. Welcome to the Divine Lifestyles Podcast. I am your host, Tara Magalski, and today I have the beautiful Jessica Nuremberg. She is a single mother by choice, which we're going to get into in this episode, who has preserved a long and arduous journey to have her unicorn baby, Kaya Lily. She professionally is a revenue driver with a long career in brand partnerships, having worked at Fortune 500s. And for the last 20 years, she has lived between New York, London, and Los Angeles, where she currently resides with baby Kaya. She is also a certified yoga instructor, which I did not know about, and runs a sponsorship program for children in Kenya. So thank you so much, Jessica, for being here. It's kind of interesting. I want to share a little bit about our story, like how I met you, and then we can dive right in. Does that sound good?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So how I found you was from our mutual friend, Jay Birnbaum. And Jay and I have been friends for the past, 4 years. And he's been watching my fertility journey. And so finally we're on the phone and he says to me, I really don't want to pry, but I've heard so much that you've been telling Sylvia and myself over the past couple of years. And I have a friend who is going through a similar process. It sounds a little bit different, but she's going through something now that reproductive immunology. And I don't know if you've explored that. And I was like, I haven't. And he said, well, she is now pregnant with her baby girl and she's about to give birth. So I really recommend that you call her. And then that was really how it all started. So, I like to say that I have to tell you, I didn't know so much about reproductive immunology prior to me doing research after you and I spoke. And I was really, really upset that I didn't know about this because I had come to my doctor who does reproductive immunology. Hi, just found this out up to 10 weeks, Dr. Jason Kofinas, 2.5 years ago, had endometriosis, already had a miscarriage, and then did 3 rounds of IVF with him, didn't get any good quality embryos. And then I was like, why wasn't he asking me to get these panels? Why was I given breadcrumbs after breadcrumb after breadcrumb? I've been to 3 reproductive endocrinologists. So I was really just like, duh, I need a reproductive immunologist. So really, I want to just share with you now, our conversation was a big turning point for me and also my best friend. So thank you for all the information that you shared with me, because it really, really put me on a different trajectory. And we can dive into that in a minute, but I want to hear a little bit about your journey with IVF to motherhood.
Perfect. Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me. First of all, let me just say I'm sorry that you've had challenges with infertility because unless you've been there, and those listeners that are hearing today, we all know each other, we all hear each other. So just sharing a big virtual hug on that. My journey too was very challenging and lonely quite sometimes. So ever since I was young, I always wanted to be a mother. I was in lots of long relationships into my early 30s. And when that long relationship ended at 32 years old, I think I realized, oh gosh, I better get on this fertility thing, because what if I don't meet somebody, and then what? And in the case of freezing eggs, it was 2014. So the technology that we all use today had just come about. And I was one of the first adopters to that, which is funny to fast forward to now reproductive immunology, because I also feel like I'm one of the pioneers in that as well. And back in 2014, I decided to go forward with freezing my eggs for this unknown of would I ever be a single mom? No, that wasn't really on my plan. However, I thought maybe this just buys me some time when I meet somebody, etc. Well, it definitely bought me time, because I went and lived my life. I froze my eggs a couple of times. I went and lived abroad. Then I moved to Los Angeles, and then COVID happened, and I was in my 40s, and it was COVID. So dating is challenging anyway. And then you layer in COVID. So still single, spoiler alert. And no one was coming to knock on my door besides the Amazon men. So I decided that it was time to go on this journey alone. And that was really when I began the entire journey of I'm going to be a single mom. And once I put my head towards that, I actually never looked back. I never thought again, well, what if I meet somebody? And I know, and I'm sharing this because so many people that will be listening that are especially in their 40s are saying, oh, I have my eggs on ice and I'm going to keep them because what if I meet this person? And what I would love to make sure that everyone hears today is that you have a couple of years now between 40 and 43 to figure out your fertility. And we don't want this time to pass, because my story ends with the fact that my eggs did not work. They did not turn into embryos. And had I not figured that out in my early 40s, I wouldn't have had the chance to have my own biological child. So with that, I'll just fast forward to reproductive immunology, and then I'll pass it back to you, Tara, to dive a little deeper with me. But essentially, throughout my journey, I did multiple retrievals and all the things that we all do during this long journey and the 2-week wait, etc. And before I decided to implant one of my very, very, very few embryos, I had heard a story of a friend who had 4 miscarriages. And she had shared that she had gone to see a reproductive immunologist. So I paused my entire my implant rather, and was supposed to be on April 13th of 2024. And I said, no, I'm going to put that on hold, and I'm going to hire one of these immunologists. And during that period of time, I went really, really deep in what reproductive immunology is, how it could support me. And when I called the immunologist, they said, well, have you had a miscarriage? And I said, no, but I only have these few embryos and I'm out of time and I'm out of money. And so they took me in as a patient, and fast forward, I had all of the issues. And had I not seen them, I would have not had this healthy baby that I have today.
Oh, I literally have full body chills. I might even just get emotional today because I had 3 miscarriages before finding you, which shared your journey. I mean, I just think what a blessing it was that you were able to. You're so educated, by the way. Oh my God. Guys listening, she sent me this spreadsheet that was insanely organized with every test. She basically took from Dr. Bear's book, all the you deciphered and distilled the information into a spreadsheet, which was amazing because it's a 490-page book. And during this process, you're really overwhelmed. That book is amazing. It's called "Is Your Body Baby Friendly?" You told me to get it. I bought it for 2 friends. It's amazing. With codes and everything for insurance. I mean, you were so well organized. And my whole, the reason I get emotional is because I don't know why. I think I'm a smart person. I'm researching why no one along my journey of 3 IVF doctors at 43 years old with 3 miscarriages, not through IVF, natural. I was getting pregnant naturally at 40, 42, and 43, miscarrying at 9 and 10 weeks, had endo in my history. Hello, alarm bells. Duh, I have an autoimmune underlying condition. 7 rounds of IVF, egg retrieval, with one good quality embryo. Like, what the fuck?
Honestly, yeah. On that note, what I've found, and then I'm going to back up and share what reproductive immunology is so the listeners can understand. But essentially, you have reproductive endocrinologists who are the doctors that we see when we go through our IVF. And they're some of the smartest doctors in the country. And then we have reproductive immunology, which is a totally separate field of medicine, which essentially focuses on why does your body attack an embryo. So think of it as an immunologist is what they are, but they focus only on reproduction. So only on this embryo. It's why is my body not getting pregnant, or why is my body not staying pregnant? Now, going back to the reproductive endocrinologist side of things, those doctors are trained to do something called a recurrent pregnancy loss panel, an RPL panel, after 3 miscarriages. So for you, Tara, frankly, they should have done this after you gone in and said I had multiple miscarriages, because you already had passed go on that. However, in my case, and what frustrates me about the medical system is, why not give the patient the opportunity to run this host of tests, and they can choose if they want to pay for it out of pocket or not? And I understand that insurances, and I'll dive deeper into that, don't cover all of these experimental immunology reports. But for example, in my case, I had already spent so many years, so much time, so much money, that I only at this time had 2 embryos to work with. And I couldn't go back and I did 10 retrievals, everybody. So this was a really, really long process. So I had these 2 miracles, and I was like, I don't want to waste and figure out if my body's going to reject one of those miracles. So it does frustrate me just as much that our system is not currently thinking about how do we get ahead of the problem and how do we help create, more pregnancies. Instead, they wait for us to have a greater problem, and then they put us into, a different house and say, okay, now we can look at certain markers. With that said, even the RPL panel that these endocrinologists will run, it has a smaller percentage of the test that the immunologist runs. So it is not an all-inclusive. It runs a bunch of different markers on blood clotting. So to see if you need blood clotting medication, which is either heparin or Lovenox throughout your pregnancy, or steroids, but it does not look at things such as natural killer cells, which is something that only the immunologist will run. And sharing upon that as well is that there are endocrinologists that do not buy into the reproductive immunologist. And it's very challenging, and you have to advocate for yourself when you're in your doctor's office that I'm going to work with an immunologist. I don't really care whether you agree with it or not. I'm going to follow their protocol and work with you to get me pregnant. And mine was actually very supportive, but I have spoken to multiple endocrinologists that don't necessarily buy into immunology. Why is that? Because all of the studies have not been completely what I'll call verified. They're more in the experimental phase. And mark my words, we'll listen to this in 20 years and we'll be like, remember when we talked about NK cells and like the endocrinologist didn't buy into it? Well, fast forward, there's been so much research now that shows that it works, right? So whatever the marker is, like it's going to be a thing in the future. I'm just of the mindset of if it's experimental even now, I want to try it. I want to get pregnant. I also had tried things like ovarian PRP, another experimental thing that they inject your ovaries literally with PRP that they take out of your body, the blood plasma. Did it work for me? No, I don't think it actually increased my AMH or my follicle count. But I was willing to try anything and everything. I had these 2 precious embryos, and I swear I look at Kaya every day and I'm like, you are a freaking miracle. A freaking miracle. Because if I didn't call the immunologist, she would not be on this earth.
Oh my gosh. Well, I 100% agree with everything you say regarding the system. And I believe, and I would love, we can sidebar on this. I think things need to be changed. They need to be changed now, because I believe any woman that is of the age 35 to 45 that just has one miscarriage should be getting these panels, the full panel.
Yeah.
I was able to get the NK cells only by advocating for myself from my reproductive endocrinologist, which then told me that I had elevated NK cells. Then I went on to do all of the other cytokines, thrombolia, went to a hematologist.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went down that path. But if I had had this information 2 to 3 years ago, when I had already suffered a miscarriage and I was working on my second miscarriage at that point, I would have had one or possibly two healthy children by now because I had gotten pregnant after that naturally. I also did experimental. I did a lympho vaccine injection where they take, your blood. It's called lymphocyte therapy. And I did that in Panama where they take your blood, they spin it, they separate the white blood cells, they inject my husband's into me to make sure I'm not rejecting him.
Yep.
So you can build up an immunity. I've also done, I went one step further and did stem cells in my ovaries.
Oh,
So
wow.
I actually took exosomes and mesenchymal stem cells and had them injected into my ovaries so I could, have a better AMH and whatnot.
And the
So
challenge with that is that even if we did, because I did the PRP before I did my immunology, even if we do all the things to get our eggs into a better spot or more follicles, right? Or a better uterine lining or whatever it might be with the stem cells, etc. If our body is still attacking that embryo, it doesn't matter how beautiful my uterus is, right? So, or how wonderful my egg is, because if I'm killing the embryo upon, putting it into my body. So this idea of like, I think it's not just a one thing. I think that those listening, you have to think about like a holistic plan. So it might be PRP plus immunology or stem cells plus, right? There's so much and it's really overwhelming when you're going into this. But I hope to implore today that like you are the advocate of your own body and nobody else is. No endocrinologist should tell you that this is woo woo or I wouldn't do that. Don't even honestly necessarily ask their opinion. Go do your own research. Go speak to immunologists, and I'll share a little bit more about that. So my friend who had told me about her story, which was 4 miscarriages, and then found an immunologist and found that she had NK cells and something else called PAI-1.
I have it. I have that too.
I do too. So when she told me, this gives me chills. We were on a beach with our moms and her 2 kids, by the way. So there's a positive end to the story. She did go through the process and have not only one healthy baby girl, but a year and 2 months later, another healthy baby girl. And that's when I decided to put pause on my process because I wanted to get under the belly of this. And when I called, I told you, and I called the doctor they were like, this is like the biggest center of immunology in the country. And they're like, we've never really worked with somebody who's never been pregnant. And I was like, but I only have these 2 embryos. You have to help me. Like, I don't care what I pay. Like, call me and tell me I just wasted so much money and that like I'm clear and I can go implant. But what happens if that's not the call I get? And I'll never forget when I got the call, not only did I have PAI-1, the one that you have as well, Tara, as well as high NK cells, as well as you do. I also had 2 other markers. I had MTHFR and I also had
Me too.
antiphosphate. Oh, wow. Do you have antiphosphate antibodies, if I'm saying that correct, for any doctors listening?
You know what? I don't believe I have that one, but I have the other 3. And I had a thyroid, a hypothyroid
I had
condition.
that too. So I was on Synthroid. So essentially, when I got back my results, I was shocked to learn that like I looked like one of their worst patients. So here I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to get a clean bill of health and have a big bill. And they're like, no, you actually have all of these issues. Had I not seen this doctor, I 100% do not believe that Kaya would be here. Just for context, the APA that I have, the antiphosphate antibodies, or however you say that correctly, has, I believe it's around like 5% people have this, and it's an 80% chance of miscarriage. And don't quote me on the exact math, but it's somewhere around there. So what that shows me is that had I not gotten ahead of how to fix it before I implanted, like I had a 20% chance of carrying that kid. And then you add that to the 65% chance of just like carrying in general from IVF. So backing up a little bit, if you have a healthy embryo, your uterus does not age. So once we get healthy embryos, which in our 40s are like nearly impossible to get, I feel like you get one and you're like, oh my God. So,
I,
right. It's like, I swear I did 6 retrievals in 12 months, every other month, just going back in, and I wasn't getting any. Right. So when you get one, you're like, oh my God, it's like, oh, right. And yeah, nobody talks about how hard it is to get embryos once we're in our 40s. So I just feel that it's so, so, so important to make sure that our body is primed and ready to receive. And I'm so grateful to have been sharing on my platform and then have help. You said you shared it with another friend. Like that's music to my ears because I swear we're changing the game one conversation at a time.
Absolutely. My best friend, and I shared this with her, my other best friend got pregnant years ago, and she was the one who told me, maybe you should get your NK cells. So it's like all of us coming together and having these conversations is what is going to help more women know about this.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I try so hard to let go the fact that I feel like I've been kind of taken advantage by this system, because I feel like just to kind of say something about the healthcare system, especially when it comes to reproductive health and infertility, there is no incentive, right, for doctors to tell us, right? They're here, it's capitalism, they're here to make money. And so even a doctor that I know, love, and trust, who I'm going in for surgery with on my uterus in 2 days to remove another adenomyosis, which
Wow.
PS, that was a new thing that they found after I went to Dr. KK.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, you should probably get this done. So they're like, why not do this? I said to him, why wasn't I doing these tests prior? Because we knew that I could potentially have an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And another important thing that I just wanted to bring up that I think people who are listening, I didn't know this, but by reading Dr. Bear's book, and I actually cried when I read the first chapter. I was like, oh my God, this is literally someone, like, I understand. Someone hears me. I'm being seen. I could have done more rounds of IVF, but without getting the proper treatment with a reproductive immunologist, my cells are breaking down my own DNA from this underlying autoimmune condition. So to be perfectly honest, I could throw 3 to 5 more rounds out at the wall and see what sticks. But even Dr. KK said, just slow down, do this. We're going to go ahead and transfer. We're going to do a mock cycle. And that's another important thing I want to tell people, because not all doctors are doing mock cycles and doing the endometrium biopsies when you're supposed to be transferring that embryo. I think it's 100% needed.
Yeah, let's talk about that actually, because
Yeah.
my reproductive endocrinologist was a fan of it. However, because I'm so vocal in this community about my what I've gone through, I've spoken to probably like 100. I'm not even joking. I think in the last week spoken to like 4 women. Like, I'm constantly speaking to people, and what I've learned is that not all doctors are fans of the testing that you're talking about, which is the Alice and Emma test, and I believe there's one third Receptiva, I believe.
Yep.
So there are these tests that are out of pocket. It costs, call it around $3,000 or so to run, and they basically do a few different things. One is seeing your progesterone, and if you need an extra day before or after to implant that embryo for the greatest optimal chance of it taking. The other thing it looks for is your lining of your uterus to make sure that there is no bacteria in there that would affect the implantation. And then I forget the third thing that it does. But essentially, some of these doctors, the endocrinologists, don't buy into it. They're like, oh, it's a waste of a test. Again, going back to this experimental. Now, if you read the research, yes, there have been some studies that say it doesn't have that much of an impact. And then there are studies that say it does. So for me, given where I was in my journey, I'd way rather spend $3,000 is a rounding error on what I've spent on IVF. So yes, I would rather spend $3,000 and know that I have the greatest chance of potentially, having this child than listen to an endocrinologist that says don't do it. So I do think it's important, once again, to advocate for yourself. If you look into the test, there are a ton of podcasts. You can just put those tests into, I think, like the Egg Whisperer is a really great resource on Spotify. And she has a podcast about this, but there's a ton of different podcasts. You can listen to experts. I'm obviously not one. I'm just here to help others advocate for themselves throughout this journey. I'm just a patient with a great success story because I advocated for myself.
Yeah, another thing I want to dive a little bit deeper into each of our personal journeys with the protocol, because I think that could be really helpful, because I think then you get a little overwhelmed, right? Yeah. So you share a bit about yours, and then mine is fresh. And by the way, I'm redoing my tests after this surgery because they could change.
Okay,
When
yeah.
you have endometriosis and you have adenomyosis in your body, it's causing inflammatory markers, which can change your protocol a great deal. So I flew out to Chicago, did everything. Now I'm doing the surgery and I'm doing it all over again.
Okay, so I'm going to let me share from a more macro level what protocols or what they test for in general into that document that you had mentioned. And feel free to reach out to myself or Tara to grab it either through my Instagram or hers. Essentially, the book starts with it all, which is Is Your Baby Body Friendly? And that is the book written by Dr. Beer, who is now deceased. Funny enough, he went to the same underground university of me in Indiana, random. When I first got the book, I was like, oh, there's a connection, but he's dead. So anyway, he pioneered this entire sector of medication or medicine rather. And the book really dives into all the different things that could happen to your body or within your body to reject an embryo. Now, it probably has like 30 or 40 different markers that one could have. One thing to share is that, and I always say this to people when they're going to buy the book, get the book because it's a great resource. It's like 500 pages. I did something which I don't recommend, which is I read it all before I got tested. And what that did was scare me a little bit of like, what if I have this and this and this? And look at how this is such a high percentage of miscarriage. And what if I have that? And I'm definitely not going to be able to carry. So you go down like a rabbit hole. Now, it turned out that of those 30, 40 markers, I only had 3 or 4 or 5, which meant that I needed certain medications and protocols, but I didn't have everything, right? So before freaking yourself out that, oh my God, this is why I'm miscarrying, I just think it's a really great resource to have. But then you have to couple that with actually doing the test to know what is it that I particular have, because everyone's journey is going to be very, very, very different in why your body is rejecting. So there are, from my research, about 5 or 6 reproductive immunologists practicing in America today. Funny enough, the person who turned me on to this field, she lives in London and had gone to a consultant in London. So I found out about this entire field through a friend in London, but then started looking into what the doctors' names were in America. So there are 5 different or 6 different immunologists in America that all have actually studied. It's like a little web tree underneath Dr. Beer, who wrote the book. And underneath him, they launched the Alan Beer Center, which is in San Francisco. And Dr. Strickler is the doctor there who I ended up using. But other doctors have trained underneath either Strickler or Bear and then trained other doctors. So there's a little web of doctors that have all trained under this one area of medicine. Now, with that said, they all practice a little bit differently. So from my conversations with different women across the world, or rather, even across the world, but mostly US, women that I don't even know, that I haven't, like Tara and I haven't met in person, but we're IVF warriors. We're just part of this community where we can help each other. So I've met all these great, incredible women down the reproductive immunology route. And what I've learned is that the different doctors have different ways about going about their protocol. So the Alan Beer Center, which is where I went, was a lower lift in the sense that you don't have to fly to their offices. They'll do everything remote with you. They send you an in-home phlebotomist. So you do all of your labs at home. So it's a really low lift for the individual. However, they create more of a standardized protocol than other centers like Dr. KK or Dr. Debola, who will customize the protocol. Like you were saying, you have to go back in after your surgery. Now, I didn't have surgery, so maybe Bear Center would have changed things. But in general, they're a little bit more less of a focused protocol than others. But the others, you have to fly and go see them for that first appointment. I think some of the offices are in Florida and in Michigan, et cetera. So it really just depends on what works for your individual lifestyle. But immunology is not the most expensive thing. The protocol actually is. So the testing is not. So I would implore you to get tested. Like, go find out if you're having miscarriages, if your body is not getting pregnant, or you're just like me and you're like, I have 1 embryo or 2 embryos. Like, I need to know what's going on in my body. Go find the doctor, get on their waiting list. Yes, they all have waiting lists because there's so few of them. And get on their waiting list. You can always cancel your appointment. That's what I said to you. I'm like, just get on everyone's waiting list and then do your research.
4 months.
It took me 3 months with Strickler, and get your tests done. So just diving into those tests, the book goes through all of them, but essentially there's a long list of different tests that they do not run at your endocrinologist. However, there are tests that can be covered by insurance, and your hematologist or general practitioner or your RE can run them for you. So you don't have to be paying out of pocket because they can go through your insurance. So in the case of my situation, I worked with the Beer Center, and they use an outside lab called ReproSource. But it turns out that ReproSource is actually affiliated with Quest Diagnostics, and I am in network with Quest Diagnostics. So there are ways to figure out how can my insurance help pay for some of these tests so it's not such an overwhelming number, a cost rather. However, where the price comes in, I'm going to jump right to protocol and then I'll pass it back to Tara to share hers, is that once you get your individualized result, and I'd shared that I had these markers, NK cells, PAI, APA, etc., and some other things, they then give you a protocol of what you're going to do for your individual body. Now, my friend in London had done something called intralipid infusions, and those cost like sub $1,000 per infusion. There's something else called IVIG, which is made from blood plasma. Those cost anywhere from $3,000 to $4,000 per infusion. So of course, when I got my results back and I knew that I had to go on infusions, they told me, I said, okay, I would love to go on the intralipids. It's actually made out of soy. It's kind of processed, but to save $3,000 each pop, I'll take the processed, even though I don't like processed food, I'll take my processed injection. And they told me, which was music to my ears, they said, oh no, we tested you against intralipids and IVIG and your cells did not react to intralipids. So therefore I couldn't do the cheaper version of this infusion. So I ended up being prescribed IVIG, which again is made from blood plasma, which they inject you pre-transplant, and then you do it 3 weeks later, and then you test to see if your body has reacted. I also was prescribed steroids. I was prescribed Lovenox, which is low-dose blood thinner, and then I was on steroids, blood thinner, and aspirin, as well as the IVIG. So that was my protocol. They tested me every 4 weeks. I did my blood testing to see if I needed any changes to that. My NK cells after the second round went down. So that was great for 7 months. And then in February, I tested again. I was due in May and they had spiked. So I had to go back on another IVIG. The beauty of that is that every month I would get my testing done. I was like, did I just save $4,000? Did I just save $4,000? Because I was scared that I was going to be prescribed IVIG again for that month, but I wasn't all through September through February. So I was really grateful that my body did react to the medication. And quite frankly, it was like fun. They would come to my house and like for 5 hours, they'd put this infusion in me and I'd like chill out and like get my Oreos and like watch TV, and not really Oreos actually. The Oreos are funny because Oreos are my memory of my egg retrievals. They give you Oreos after the retrieval. And I was like, I never eat Oreos. I was like, Oreos. Now I eat like whatever the healthy Oreo would be without like processed, corn oil.
I've got an exciting offer for all of my listeners. The free Divine Daily Practices video series. Get simple practices to release anxious thoughts, sharpen your intuition, and rewire your nervous system in less than 10 minutes a day. Come on over to my website at divinelifestyles.com/divine daily practices. And over the next week, you'll receive a complimentary self-care system to drop into your authentic self and activate your divine intuitive wisdom. I hope you enjoy.
So long story that my protocol looks very different or somewhat different than others because there are small tweaks to them. But in general, you will see that immunology protocols do have some level of an infusion, a steroid, a blood thinner. They're kind of a cocktail of medications and they're all kind of the same, but they get tweaked a little bit. And then there's also something of where I think you had done something similar of in Mexico, if you have a partner, they can give you antibodies to the male sperm. So they can take blood from your partner and inject it, I guess, clean it and then inject it back to you so your body doesn't reject that. Now, if you're a single woman like myself, the way, if I wanted to do that, I would have had to find a male friend to go to like Tijuana, no joke, and give blood and spin it to then put it back in me because it's any male, which I found so interesting. It's not just your partner. It's just like the male antibodies. It's bonkers. So I chose not to do that. That felt like a tall lift to call my friend's husband and be like, hey, do you want to come to Tijuana with me and give some blood?
Well, yeah. And you can do it in Panama, but you're supposed to do it more than once, right? So you want to do it 2 to 3, maybe even 5 times based on your reaction. And all is like dependent on how they put it in your arm, like in your forearm. They inject it and it's how you respond. And so it's over like a 7 to 10 day period. If it's a bad response, okay. If it's not a bad response, it's actually, the doctor explained it to me like this. I'm kind of like giving your body the antibodies like you had a miscarriage. So you're able to create HLAs, which will protect the embryo, the barrier around the embryo. So your NK cells don't kill them.
Oh, wow.
It's like the NK cells are, the killer T cells are high. the cells, the cytokines are not sending the right message to your HLAs, which are to surround the embryo to protect it. I'm like, okay. He literally drew it for me. I was like, I have no idea what you're saying. He goes, okay, let me draw it for you. I was like, please. He's like, I said, okay. Because I was really nervous. I was like, I don't, I'm
In
not.
Panama, nonetheless. So you got
Yeah.
a patient to Panama in all of this.
But
You're
by the
looking,
way, Panama's pretty amazing.
yeah.
Panama's like really amazing. I've never been to that city before. It's really booming. It's one
So
of the
cool.
like biggest, economies in the world. Um, but back to protocol. So mine is very similar to yours as of right now. But like I said, things
And
could
share
change.
a little bit, Tara, about your choosing of Dr. KK and why you looked at, because you did look at different doctors and that you chose to go with KK versus Strickler. So share a little bit about your experience on that too.
Yeah. So you had told me that Strickler was a little bit more standardized. And I was like, I really need someone who's not going to just be like cookie cutter and is not going to tell me it's just one way or no way. Plus, I don't vibe with doctors like that I need someone that I could like kind of talk to and, be more experimental. So that was why. But when I read the book and I found out that Dr. KK was, under Dr. Alan Bear, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but he's like a legend. And like literally in the book, it says like any woman who has endo needs to get these tests. Like it's so written in black and white. And this book was written in what, 2006?
Yeah. Isn't it crazy that we're in 2024 and like it's not just standardized? Okay, we digress. We already talked about that. But anyway, yes.
So when I read the book, it made me even more angry that this is not standardized. And the fact I went to my endometriosis doctor who did my surgery 2.5 years ago, I'm like, I'm giving him the book, by the way, like you need this and I actually told him, I was like, I love you, but like, why didn't you tell me sooner to do these tests? Like, I
I
can't
will
get over
say my endocrinologist here in Los Angeles, Dr. De Ugarte, Dr. Catherine De Ugarte, who I loved and did my 6 retrievals. We also did mini IVF. So for those of you that are older age and want to consider mini IVF, there are some folks, again, in the endocrinology space that don't believe in it. So it was something that my doctor did and wanted to try. So she was a little bit more experimental than others. However, was the person that gave me the first appointment that I had with her. I said, before my friend even told me about her miscarriages, she had written down the Dr. Beer Center in San Francisco. And she had one testing. And I had a piece of paper with her, it was like a little Post-it with her name on the top, Dr. De Ugarte, like one of these script pads. And she had written it down and I had it in my notes. And when I met my friend, many, many months later, it like came back to me of like, wait, I think my doctor had given me a name of a center. And that's where I started with it. So I actually do applaud her for not necessarily working together with them, but at least saying to me as a patient, like, if you want to be crazy about finding out all these other things, like go for it, Jess, like here you go. So I wish that more doctors were empowered. And I'm glad you gave the book to yours. I've done that in the past. It's quite funny. I'm like, I've read this medical literature and I would like you to read it too. Because we have to, continue to help women, one by one, get to a healthy pregnancy. So going back to your protocol, then what did they end up putting you on? And going back to KK, you were saying and why you chose it.
So KK was in the book and she was recommended. And also because you had put together that really great spreadsheet, I was able to go through every single name. I was able to go Google them, find out where they studied, who they trained under, got in all the Facebook groups, asked everybody tons of questions. I found out about Dr. Jason Kofinas being able to prescribe medications from the Facebook group. Meanwhile, I'm his patient. So
No.
that's a sidebar.
Okay. I'm going to interject you on that again for the face, and then we're going to go back to choosing KK. But Facebook groups, really important, because that was another thing that I recommended was going into Facebook and looking up reproductive immunology. There are going to be master groups or just like reproductive immunology. And then there are subgroups for patients of Dr. DeBulla, patients of Dr. Strickler. You don't have to actually be their patient. You can join these groups. I would spend hours at night just reading through, and that's how I found out about so many things. So I implore everybody to go sign up for those groups and just start reading. Okay, back to you. Sorry, I thought that was important to share.
Yes, I know. There's so much to talk about. I'm like, we could hours.
Mhm.
So that is how I was learning. And then a lot of people were commenting about Dr. KK and how they were trained. You also put me in touch with someone else who was with Dr. Derbula. I got on his wait list as well, got in with Dr. KK first. And so I said, you know what? I kind of liked this. I just followed
Right.
that. Also, Dr. Derbula was underneath Dr. KK as far as training. And also Dr. KK created like the lad test, like she invented it. And a lot of people in New York, there are some people who aren't the top fives, but a guy named Dr. Jonathan Schur, who's helping my girlfriend, they send all of their tests out to her at the Roseland Franklin University. And then also Dr. Jason Kofinas, he sends all of his stuff to her. So I was like, okay, she must be the next best. So that's why I decided to go to her. We sat, we talked. When I got there, I had to fly in. The blood flow uterine sonogram was also a major, major thing that you had told me. Make sure that they're doing that. She was offering that. I think that there was a few others that weren't doing that. I
Nice.
also worked with the Braverman with Dr. Thornton and Dr. Vidali years ago and did all the pregnum testing. But I wasn't really like loving them. I followed up with Dr. Thornton again before seeing Dr. KK and went through everything all over again. And he said, you know what? I think you should go to Dr. KK. He's like,
Wow.
what do
I
you
love to
think
hear it.
that he goes, I do things a little bit differently. I have a little bit like we have our own sort of testing system, but for what you're looking for, I think you need to go to her.
Great.
Then I talked to Dr. Alexander Kofinas as well here in New York. He makes like supplements and vitamins, but he doesn't prescribe IVIG. I also chatted with Dr. Jason Kofinas again, and he was like, well, why don't we just try intralipids / clinolipids, which apparently are the same thing. Clinolipids are now replacing intralipids. I'm not sure if that's correct.
Does KK test in the lab, and I don't know if you're there yet, to see if you're reactive to intralipids or IVIG?
No, no. And that was my first question to her. She does not prescribe intralipids, only IVIG.
Okay. So then that covers that. So then it takes care of that. Because I would say that in London, my friend had not been tested. So they just get intralipids. And frankly, it worked for her. So yay, great. But I'm grateful that I was tested to know that the cheaper version was not going to be working for me, because I would have then just wasted time and money and not gotten
Yeah.
anywhere. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
So now back to protocol, which is why I kind of left the IVIG thing where it is. She did not prescribe IVIG for me. As of now, right? We're going to go back and get tested. As of right now, it's pretty much everything that you were prescribed minus the IVIG. So the aspirin, the Lovenox, the Synthroid, the prednisone.
Yep. I was on that.
So that's where she wants to start me baseline. One thing that I told her and Dr. Jason Kofinas was that I want to be on this medication for like as long as I can prior to transfer, because I want to like keep testing. So I just started. Oh, and also metformin.
Oh, yep.
Have you on metformin?
So I did have elevated blood sugars years ago. I was pre-diabetic and I wore a glucose monitor for 2 years to help me, which is a whole nother podcast. Again, very ahead of my time. I had gotten a continuous glucose monitor because I was like very, very on the verge of being pre-diabetic. So I got really crazy about managing blood sugars. I no longer do that. But I wasn't of need of, the reason they give you metformin is it really helps with blood sugar regulation. So many women are prescribed that in the immunology world. And I believe there's something in the book about it as well.
They prescribed it for the PAI-1.
Oh,
Because I
interesting.
told them I was on metformin years ago for one of my prepping for an IVF egg retrieval. I actually didn't like it because it made my body a little bit numb. Like it made the left side of my body like be more tingly. So I stopped it. Dr. Jason Kofinas is like, yes, I'm all for it before transfer. But I believe she wanted me to do it because of the PAI-1. I have a double gene mutation from both parents.
Oh, wow. I have from PAI, you're saying, the double
Yeah,
gene mutation?
I have it from both.
Oh, interesting. I know that for MTHFR, I had both. There's 2 different copies of that, and I had both of those. But I think the point of all of this is what's interesting is like if you go to different doctors, you and I have the exact same thing, and our protocol is a little different. It doesn't mean one is right or wrong. It's just the way that that doctor practices. So I wouldn't be, I think that when we're going through this, we can overthink things, right? Of like, oh, well, she did that and maybe I should have done that because now it's not going to work. You have to trust your doctor, and
Yeah.
these are experts in their field, right? So once you select your doctor, and like this is how I felt when I chose Strickler, even knowing that he wasn't as customized as some of the others, I was like, I choose my choice and I trust the process. So I think that it's just really leaning into that as opposed to like, well, why are you having this and I'm not having this, right? Because I didn't get metformin, and they gave me whatever else, whatever cocktail of meds they put me on, they believe that that would take care of my PAI.
So one thing that I am asking them to do, and again, I say this because you have to be your own advocate and you have to push these doctors and you have to just be, I'm like, I'm up their ass. I'm like, how are you doing this? Why are we doing this? Da, 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 da. I ask a million questions. So after now I'm on this Synthroid, taking that then we're retesting. So I retest again in October. October 4th, I retest just a few things again because I want to see how my levels are after 30 days.
Okay.
Actually, it's going to be even more than 30 days. It's going to be like 45 days. Then I have to wait after surgery 6 to 8 months. I want to make sure that we cover this because that was something that I was like, oh, this is very important. You mean like your body is still in trauma? And if I took blood tests any sooner, it could really throw off my protocol. So it's a minimum of 6 weeks. I'm waiting 8 because listen, at this point,
You said months. You're saying 6 to 8 weeks because you had said months earlier.
I say months. Okay. I'm sorry, 6 to 8 weeks.
Got it. Okay.
6 weeks minimum from surgery, post-surgery, so the body can heal.
Yep.
I'm waiting 8 because, as you know, I have one embryo and I'm just trying to do the best that I can do.
Yep.
So I'm going to wait 8. Then we're testing again in November, first week in November, all of the stuff that Dr. KK needs. And at that point, Dr. Jason Kofina said, if Dr. KK does not recommend you doing IVIG, right, nothing has changed, Tara, I would then ask for the test to do the intralipid. He goes, and honestly, it's like $1,000 at this point. Just do it.
Yeah, I would
I'll
actually
prescribe it.
I would ask her why she's not prescribing you IVIG and if there's any downside, because if there's not, I would actually say just do IVIG. It just essentially is this incredible, it can't hurt you, right? So it's just blood plasma increasing your immunity. So I would ask her if there's a world in which, because if they're on the fence of like maybe prescribing it or maybe not, like to your point, like you've already thrown so much money at this that like an extra couple thousand here or there, which I know sounds crazy to some people, but when you spent so much money doing this and you have one embryo and one chance, like, so I would challenge her on that and get a better understanding of her why. And maybe there is a why that we don't know. We're not doctors, right? But to your other doctor's point, like if it's not going to hurt, I would ask for it.
Well, his perspective was definitely do an intralipid. I'll prescribe it. No big deal. Yep. But IVIG, Dr. KK does not believe in intralipids.
Correct.
She won't test for them or prescribe them. She will only go directly to IVIG.
So maybe ask her if the why you didn't get IVIG and if there's any downside of you going on IVIG, because at least from my experience, with my NK cells, IVIG was used for NK cells in my experience. So before my transfer, we did it. Then a couple of weeks after my transfer, I got my second infusion. Then we retested my NK cells. We were able to see that it actually affected it, which is super cool. When your numbers come down, you're like in the clear. And then we tested again, as I mentioned, every single month. And at the 7th month or so was when I saw a flare up because my numbers came back too high and they put me back on IVIG. We tested again and my numbers came back down. So if there's no reason to not use it, right? There might be like hey, your blood did it. I don't know. But if there's no reason not to use it, I don't know. And if she does prescribe it, then I would consider it. I also had shared, I had done IVIG. Most insurance companies will not cover it. It's experimental for, which is frustrating. Again, back to this whole fertility thing. It's experimental for fertility, but not if you're like a cancer patient or you have other things in your body, immunology. So I was not able to get it approved. However, other women in the IVF community have through their insurances. Most people I know have not gotten it approved. And therefore I had called every company that prescribes IVIG to find the lowest cost effective way to do it. And for me, Kroger, and I did it last year. So this is being recorded in 2024. I had done my IVIG in 2023. That year, Kroger was the most cost affordable. So if you do need to go down this road, in the document I provided you, there is an IVIG tab of where I did a cost analysis of all the providers, and Kroger was the most expensive.
You know what I'll do? I'll make sure to put this in the show notes. So everybody in the show notes, you're listening, it will be there and you'll be able to actually find that document.
Right.
The one thing that Dr. KK mentioned to me is that she thought, and she was going to retest, and I want to get into the testing and how often, because Dr. KK is going to be doing it more frequently.
Wow.
She said that the prednisone might get me where I need to be rather than doing IVIG. And I said, listen, I'm game for whatever. Let's just keep testing me. So
yeah, that makes sense to me. So if your body's reacting, if they're doing the NK cell test, it's called the assay. I think the NK assay is the follow-up test. If they do that and your numbers have come down based on the steroids, then sure, you don't need to spend thousands of dollars. That makes sense. And that goes back to the more customized protocol. Like mine was like more one and done. Like here's your IVG, here's your, your prednisone here. And yes, they were testing, but it wasn't like an if A then B. It was more like, here's your, your ingredients, and like go bake your cake.
Hey, whatever the case may be,
but it worked.
Happy.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the frequency of testing versus like our doctors. And then I definitely want to talk about something that you shared with me about your placenta, because I think that was when you were giving birth. I think that that's important because I just think it's a very important topic. So Dr. KK said and that's why I chose to go with her as well, is that she was going to be testing more aggressively. So she was testing every 2 weeks from date of, pregnancy test that's positive. And then after 14 weeks, she will do probably 3 to 4 weeks from there.
Okay.
So that was something I said, I want you with me the day I'm pregnant to before I'm pregnant to the day of delivery. And she's like, okay. I'm like, that's why I'm looking for someone like you.
Yeah.
And Dr. Jason Kofinas can also help. He's like, I'm very interested to see what her protocol is. He also can run some tests as well locally, but he can only follow me until 10 weeks because he doesn't have, the proper license to go any further. Just want to share that for people listening, because I know a lot of people in the Facebook groups are, using, for me, I've got one embryo. I'm like, no. I need 2 people who know what they're doing. Like that way we can discuss, maybe tweak. But let's talk a little bit about your experience giving birth. And you were sharing a little bit about your placenta and what the nurses had said to you. And how the reproductive immunology impacted that.
Well, I'm not sure if it was our conversation. Driving a little bit deeper into the placenta story.
I thought that the nurses had said that your placenta was very almost damaged, and that you had thought that you could have even gone further with more aggressive therapy for reproductive immunology.
So it wasn't our conversation, so that might have been another conversation. However, okay. I will share, though, that because of IVF, which doesn't have to do with immunology, but I had something called a bilobed placenta, which I had never heard of. And until I got my scan, and to share what Tara was saying, you go to the IVF doctor, the reproductive endocrinologist, up till 10 weeks, where you then transfer to just a regular OB, like you're just part of the regular OB people. But when I did my scans, they had seen a bilobe placenta, which means my placenta actually split into 2. So one placenta, it went around, and then I had one cord, but my placenta looked like this. So it covered parts of my uterus. And essentially I was nervous about the fact that I was going to have placenta previa, I was going to cover my cervix, not be able to deliver vaginally. That wasn't the case, but of course I had read all the studies and the research and all the things. So placenta wise, I'm not sure from an immunology standpoint, but what I would say is that intuitively, it makes sense to me that the health of your placenta would be attributed to the health of your body. So if you are, going on the immunology route and really helping your cells be the best version that they can be, I would assume that would go, downstream to your placenta, which feeds your baby.
Yeah, so I was chatting with someone, and I chat with so many people
Yeah.
through the Facebook group. So what she had said was is that when she gave birth, the placenta, the nurse was like, "Wow, I've actually never seen a placenta. It looks quite damaged. Like,
No.
thank God the baby is healthy."
Wow.
And the person had said, I could have probably been more aggressive, but they were nervous because you're taking medications and you're
Right.
really just not sure. But it really just showed her, oh, wow, I really do have a pretty intense underlying autoimmune condition. My baby's safe and fine, but I probably could have gone more aggressive
Yeah,
with
it makes sense to me, just again intuitively, because a lot of what the immunology protocols focus on is like this suppression. It's you're immunocompromised, right? So it's for those of us that are immunocompromised with an autoimmune disorder or other things. So the cells, if you have inflammation in your body, and like if you are celiac, right, and you eat gluten, you're going to have inflammation in your body, and it's not much different when it comes to creating this placenta, which by the way is like a brand new organ that we create to give birth, which is just so bonkers, and then it comes out of our body. Like the female reproductive system, like going through this entire journey from like making embryos to like with a sperm donor nonetheless, to then implanting it, to then giving birth, and then being back to my normal self, like 4 months later, you're like, what just happened? Like, we are superheroes. We truly are reproductive like unicorns. The whole thing is just quite incredible. Truly it is.
it's so incredible. And we're so lucky that we have the resources to do this. And I just would love for you to share, any advice for anyone who's listening, like cut and dry, like what would be a young woman who's maybe
That's
35, 36, right? She's hasn't gotten pregnant. She's been trying for a while, whether she's in a relationship or not. Like,
yep.
what does she do? Where does she start?
Okay, so first off is, I mean, I think it's a little bit different if you're in a relationship or not, because I would say make embryos because then you know what you're working with. Obviously, if you're not in a relationship, but I was in my early 30s when I froze my eggs, and I wasn't ready to choose a sperm donor then. So I know it's really hard for women to hear, like when I tell them, like, oh, maybe in the future you're going to want to have, a sperm donor child because you always think you're going to meet that guy. But what I would say is that regardless of where you are in life, if you're in your mid 30s, like try to make an embryo. You want to know what you're working with. If you're trying to make an embryo and it doesn't work, then all of a sudden you know that something larger is going on and you can get ahead of it because your fertility, I know that they say like your maternal age at 35, and I used to like poo-poo it, like, oh, advanced geriatric maternal age or whatever they call us. And let me tell you, the charts are really scary. When you see the chances of having a euploid embryo after 40 years old to 43, it literally falls off a cliff. Like it's like 35, 35, 35, 40, all the way to the bottom. It's like a race to 43. And then it's kind of game over. And sure, there are some people that will be outliers of at a 44, you'll do a retrieval or you'll get pregnant naturally. Absolutely. We all have heard those stories, but those are the anomalies. Those are the outliers. So let's not find ourselves in those people. Let's find ourselves in the statistics. So what I would say is just try to make embryos if you can. If you're not getting pregnant, so let's say you're doing IVF or you're just naturally not getting pregnant, either way, think about pairing immunology into your protocol. Have a conversation, read the book, go into the Facebook groups, like educate yourself and advocate for yourself. Nobody else is on this pregnancy journey but you. All of your other friends that have gotten pregnant or not gotten pregnant, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. This is your journey. It's your body. And each one of our bodies is so different from one another. So yes, we can find support and we can find information even by listening to this podcast. But until you go and you actually inquire, like what's going on with my body, it's all conjecture. You don't know what actually is. So that's all I would say.
And I am literally the poster child for this because I did exactly what I didn't know, but I just did back to back to back to back IVF rounds from 41 to 43 because I knew that's what I needed to do. Did not do the reproductive immunology. Now here I am, 44, moving forward with this one embryo transfer. But my Dr. KK even said, you seem to be getting pregnant naturally. Your body wants to do its thing. Let's do this reproductive immunology. Let's try the transfer. You might even get pregnant on your own. You could
Right,
get
right.
pregnant, if you
Keep
don't.
trying, honey. Every month you keep trying because
Yeah.
especially as your body is on the immunology protocol, it's primed to receive, right? So you
Mhm.
try 12 times a year and like you might find a miracle baby in there, right? If your body is ready to receive. And the other thing is because your uterus doesn't age, even if you implant at 46, like if you needed another year of medications or whatever it might be, which will not be the case. Point is that once you have your embryo, you have a chance of your own biological kid, no matter what age you are. So that's why I say make embryos early, because then you know what you're working with. And even if your body is going through, issues or rejecting, at least you have your little arsenal of embryos to then work with.
And Jess, I even thought about this. I thought maybe I should go on the like start, the new protocol after getting, might not even be a new protocol, but after I get the surgery, I could do one round of IVF after doing the medications for a little while, like
That's
squeeze in
yeah,
an
you might get
IVF
one.
cycle
You might get
and
one.
then go to transfer.
Yeah, I mean, and also you might even not. I mean, I guess at our age, you kind of want to test, but like you might get a few, if you get some day threes, you might do a fresh transfer and see if your body takes it. Like talk to your doctor about that. So there's so many different paths. And honestly, also like to think about, this is a little scary of a thought. Like even if you wanted to do a surrogate instead of your own body, I want to share light on that as well. One of the challenges I have with that is like, yes, you would always want to choose somebody who had a successful pregnancy before to know that their body can carry. But it's also a bit scary because even people that are surrogates can have immunology issues. And you don't, even if they've had, or people have had, and people listening today, you might have had, as someone just reached out to me yesterday on this, like, what if I already had a healthy child, but I'm having trouble getting pregnant? And my response was, well, first of all, with IVF, it's only a 65% chance that that embryo is going to take for anybody, like even if you're the healthiest person in the world. And for example, I had something that had that I mentioned earlier, an 80% chance of miscarriage, which means I'm going to give you the positive. 20% of the time, I would have gotten pregnant naturally. Had I had a partner and we were trying, there's a chance 20% I would have carried to term. So there is a world in which I would have had a natural, healthy, happy, pregnancy. However, what we don't know is what we don't know. So you can even have a surrogate. And honestly, if you have all the means in the world, I would have the surrogate go through reproductive immunology, right? If I was like a celebrity, that's what I would do. I'd be like, not only are you going to try to carry my embryo, but I'm going to put you through an immunologist. And I know that everyone doesn't have all the means, and this is such an expensive journey for all of us, and every dollar starts to count. So I empathize with that as well. And there are so many different paths. And just to, finish out is that, even in your journey, and I don't know where, and you don't have to answer this question, but where your head is at as far as like, even if your own embryo doesn't work, there are so many other paths to motherhood, and like egg donors and sperm donors and making an embryo, or your own husband's sperm with an egg donor. I have a
Yeah.
friend who just recently did that and carried at 49 years old and is thinking about a second now. So like age is just a number. The uterus doesn't age. There are so many different paths to motherhood, whether you do a surrogate, you carry in your own, an egg donor, a sperm donor, like it really doesn't matter. I'm a mom now, and like that's the only thing that matters. And I'm so grateful that she is biologically mine. But had she not been, and I had to go down a different journey, like I would have loved her just as much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the next couple months are going to be really, really interesting. I'm going to keep getting tested and really see where my body's at. But I did also ask Dr. KK, I said, hey, do all the tests. And if my body shouldn't carry, look me in the eye and tell me to get a surrogate. Okay. She's like, well, that's expensive. I said, well, just tell me what I need to do so I don't put my body through hell to not be able to carry full term. And she
And
said,
it's not the doctor's choice to tell us that things, and again, like, could I have done a surrogate? No, probably not. Like, but it's not the doctor's choices to tell us, should I have these immunology tests or not? Like, I was willing to pay out of pocket for those. So
yeah.
that's not their choice. They don't know each individual situations. And also, everyone spends money in different ways. You might throw your entire life savings against trying this, right? And it depends on you, not what the doctor's opinion is. So back to advocating for yourself, like let all those noises like go in and out of your ear, get the information and make decisions that are good for you.
And every doctor is going to have some difference of opinion. And then that's going to make your head spin as well. So I feel that this process, and I want to close out on this, you have to listen to your intuition. I feel like you have to listen to your body and what your gut is telling you. How do you feel energetically when you walk into that doctor's office? Do you feel like this person gets you? Like you have to listen to that small whisper inside. Otherwise, you will spin out. So the only thing that's kept me of the past 4 years grounded was that I could just follow my inner compass. Like, no, this is the right way for me. And then even after I would get a little breadcrumb and a little breadcrumb, and then finally I'd be like, oh my God, why didn't I know this information? It's like, you just have to keep following the path, because there is a reason why we're going through this, right? It's so we can share this information now. If I had found Jessica 3 years ago, it would be a different story.
Yeah,
but I
and
didn't.
you might have done it, got pregnant, and then never thought twice about it, right? Because of your journey and how challenging it has been, that you are now emotionally invested in trying to find, a path for you and others. Like, we're sharing this information on a more public platform today. And like, for that, I'm grateful. And I'm sharing my story with others because people are like, you should be an IVF. I'm like, no, I'm not trying to be a consultant or anything. I'm literally trying to get one person pregnant at a time. And if I can have a conversation or a DM, like, I speak to so many people in my Instagram, I'm like, I'm not a doctor, guys. Like, I'm just sharing with you what I've learned. And if I can give you one little piece of information, and believe me, Tara knows something different than I know now because she's a different protocol. So like, all of a sudden we all learn off of each other. And thank you for giving me this platform to, help bring light to this area of medicine. And I hope that we do listen to this in 20 years and look back and say, told you so.
Or what I really would like is, I would like for us all to come together. I want to write this down. I want to write this book. And I haven't, it's like Battlefield Fertility. It's like the blueprint for women. And I think that we need to band together and actually get some laws changed and start having conversations with insurance companies and making sure that we have options, that more doctors are saying, oh, let me look at you from a different perspective. That's what I'm hoping to do with every conversation, right? Is have more people listen, more people pregnant, and more doctors look at the body rather than like a number of a patient that's coming through and saying, how can I serve them? How can we create a win-win? When you think about it, doctors are not given any financial incentive to give us this information. Mm-hmm. So they're not.
No, I understood. Completely agree. It's sad.
And unfortunately, that's where we are. But this is the beginning of a revolution of change. So thank you so much for being here. And I'd love for you to just share with folks where they can find you online, to connect with you.
So the best place is my Instagram, which is J Nuremberg, which is my last name. It's JNUREMBERG, and Tara can link it as well. And my Instagram is public, and I talk a lot about my journey / now a lot of pictures of baby Kaya, but I'm super open. If you're going to go down this field, this road, ask me, ask Tara, ask others, go into those groups. Don't be shy, ask for support, ask for the information you need, and advocate for yourself. We're in this together, and one more baby at a time. I feel like we're doing God's work one child at a time. Eventually, there'll be laws that help us, do this on the masses, but we're here to help in the meantime.
Thank you so, so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Divine Lifestyles Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your episodes. If you really loved this episode, screenshot it and share it on social media. It will help us to continue to make an impact. With gratitude and love always, keep illuminating your path.